Welcome back, everyone, to another year, 2022, and it's another episode of Pats Uncovered. We're back again this year. Really excited for the year ahead and all the different podcasts. So yeah, Pats Uncovered is a podcast where we talk about untraditional pathways into technology, and that's been the main focus. But I think this year we're going to kind of expand that out, maybe to traditional paths, or even people who've taken the traditional paths and like pivoted away from it in the future in their careers. So yeah, brace yourselves for a whole range of everything this year. But today is an untraditional path into tech. And she's the first one I'm like recording this year with. So it's a great way to ease myself back into it because she's perfect for this as well. Like it's going to be really good chat. So I've got Milly Schmidt with me.
Hello.
And she's also based in fabulous Melbourne. So we're getting along and this is perfect. And I think at one stage I was contemplating doing like in-person recordings of these. And then I was like, no, like why the effort of doing that? No one wants to leave their house and do this. And also this makes everything so much easier. I get more people signed on to doing this way. So this is much better. But how are we doing, Milly? Do you want to do a quick intro to yourself? And yeah, let us know who you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am, how do you describe yourself quickly? I work in tech. I most recently was Director of Product at Usability Hub. And probably very appropriately for this podcast, I do all sorts of things. I was once a dev and then I was a designer, and now I work pretty much as a manager. So I work in kind of management, leadership, strategy roles. And I've done research and I've done all sorts of things. So I do work with I work with tech companies. I'm a technical person. I work a lot with startup and now increasingly kind of bigger teams as well. And I like making things, and I also like helping other people make things. So yeah, I'm just a person who asks a lot of questions and a person who uses a lot of post-it notes.
Oh my God, stop. I couldn't start this year. I was just like, so many things in the back of my brain at the same time of like, oh, I need to do this and then this and then this, and it just keeps piling up. And I bought myself a magnetic like whiteboard, and I created like a magnetic Kanban board because post-its just kept falling down for me. I don't know how those go for you, but anytime I put them up on a wall, they're down within 2 hours, and it just wrecks my brain that I'm like, all my brain dump just out the window. Yeah. Very sad. But yeah, I completely feel on the post-its. And I think, a whole, like, I think we did 20 episodes last year, and every single time, I don't think I ever narrowed down how to do a proper introduction. And I don't think I ever will, to be honest, because everyone's so different and unique that I'm like, you know what, you take this intro whichever way you like, whether it's short or long, I'm not fussed about it at all.
Yeah, I think I struggle with it a little bit because I have like meta thoughts about identity and about role and stuff like that makes it difficult for me to kind of describe myself succinctly. But we have an hour, so hopefully we'll get somewhere in that time.
Exactly. Okay, so Laurie, let's jump right in. Milly, take me back. We usually start here around the high school, college times of your career or your pathway. What was happening? What were the decisions happening around then? And where did we all start off this untraditional pathway at?
What a question. I'm really old now, so going back into the past. In my final year of high school, I studied in New South Wales, and I'd studied 4 units of English, which included a major work, 2 units of art, 3 units of music, and 2 units of maths, I think. Or maybe it was 2 of music. So I'd kind of gone quite heavily on the art side. I did math because I kind of felt like I should. Maybe it was like an insecurity thing. I really wanted to prove that I could do maths, even though I was obviously very invested in the arts side. And I did quite well, mainly on the strength of my writing major work. And I did not achieve any top of anything. I didn't get any awards or anything. I got a kind of, I think they made up this award maybe for most creative. So I left school, thinking a lot about my options and not really sure what would happen next. But I was very interested in further study. And I had been really lucky enough in high school I put myself forward for what was essentially taking a unit of philosophy at a university. And it gave me actually like six, I think, units of university credit to study philosophy. Um, and that was really good. I realized I really, really liked university study. At that point, I was really interested I read a lot, I was writing a lot, I was just, I just wanted to consume as much information as I could, especially in the arts where my interest lay. So I ended up doing an arts degree, and I did an arts degree that was technically called an advanced arts degree. So that meant that I could fast track through kind of the 101 units. So when you do an arts degree, say you're studying like art history, you have to do some like very basic kind of overview units, and you have to do them before you do the more advanced ones. And in this degree, I could skip those and I could just do third year units in my first year. And I focused on kind of art history, film studies, and English literature in my degree. I did a couple of bits and bobs, did like a unit of psych and a unit of classics and stuff, but that was my focus. And I just I loved it actually. I'm a big nerd, really. And I loved writing essays, and I loved arguing with people in tutes. And yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. And while I was doing that, I kind of just, like, I'd moved out and I was doing a whole lot of odd jobs. I worked at World Bar in Sydney, which was, this is thinking back to this time now. I've been thinking really nostalgically for this time recently, because it was just a totally different era. We put on the biggest nights. There were like 4 floors in this venue with bands and DJs, and it was like packed out. I worked as a photographer for them, so I would go in and I'd be that person with like the big DSLR, like taking the club photos of people.
Those would come back and haunt me my whole life, but yes.
No, you would have looked like a babe. Like, I made everyone look like a babe. Big flash, just like all your imperfections. But we also were babes, like we were young. Anyway, so I did that. I also wrote for and like edited an online magazine that bar ran called Throw Shapes. And I did a lot of freelance journalism. I was really into music and arts journalism, so I would like review albums and shows, and I ended up taking photos at shows as well. I also, brace yourself, there's a lot that was happening this time. I worked on cruise boats in the city, in Sydney Harbour. So people would go out on these like big catamarans, and you get on one of these boats. I'm there, I take your photo while you're on the boat, and then like you go in, I go downstairs and I print them out and I put them in a folder, and I come back and I sell them to you. A lot of that, and then sometimes also like Ken's parties and stuff would come on. So I did that. That was actually like a very lucrative gig, and I have pretty good sea legs, so I just spent a lot of time on boats. Especially I did daytime stuff and I did nighttime stuff. That served me quite well for quite a long time. And I was an English tutor, so English and a couple of other things, but like high school students, I would basically connect with their parents, and through just like word of mouth referral, I ended up with quite a stable of students that I worked with, and I was tutoring them with essay writing usually for their final exams. So I'd go to their house and sit with them for an hour, get paid my whatever it was, like $70-$80 a session, and then go off to the next one. And I also taught music. So I taught the flute at my old high school. I can't remember whether it was I don't think it was via my flute teacher, but I think I was just on good terms with the faculty. And they had an opening for their junior school flute program. So teaching like grade 4 and 6 girls how to make a sound on an instrument, and eventually, learn pieces together and perform at their school concerts. And I have a photo of that actually, if you can get it and show you, because it's quite funny.
I think, honestly, I completely understand the whole prize for the most creative. Like, this completely lines up and makes sense with everything you're telling me.
So this is me with my flute student.
Oh my God, that is brilliant.
Isn't it good? So I had I think I had two or three groups, but that was quite good as well. And I don't know if there was anything else. That was probably it. And then, oh yeah, every now and then I would DJ sometimes, because I was like a DJ
Why not?
with my CDs and my CD. You know, we had CDs, and if people maybe people watching this won't know what CDs
They
are.
definitely will. Surely, please give me hope.
And the whole time I lived in Sydney, while I was in this period, I had my little red Vespa, and I would scoot around. And I was just like going from gig to gig and doing my degree, and lived in Newtown, and yeah.
So this
So
was
I
all
I did
during
that for a
college, right?
while. Essentially during college, yeah.
Yeah.
So between like 2006 to 2009, while I studied, that was my that was my weird, fun, cool life. And I
Oh,
also managed to go out and party quite a lot. So
so
yeah,
you're either there to photograph
a
the
different
people or
era.
the one being the photographed. I like it. It's a good mix of
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. So it was there. That was what had happened at that point. Like after I finished my degree, and it was like 2009. Remember, this is also the GFC has just hit.
Yep.
And suddenly, kind of the opposite to what's happening now, like people are starting to get fired from places. Like people are getting let go because like just the money isn't as good as it used to be, and like for reasons you might not be able to comprehend. I didn't comprehend. Like I think like the people who own the bar that like employed me through this publication and stuff had other investments maybe that weren't working out, and then they had to consolidate, and they ended up like that role kind of finished up, which was like not my whole life, but one part of it.
Yep.
And I also kind of had gotten to the point then that I was like, this has been fun, but I think it's time to get a real job. I'd never worked full time at that point, so I thought it would be something that I should kind of try. And I started to. There's like one funny connection piece here, which is that I worked for a street press publication in Sydney called The Brag, and or it might have been through a different one actually, but I was sent on this um, journey. It was on a train called the Bacardi Express, and it was sponsored by Bacardi, and it went from like Queensland down the coast all the way down to Melbourne, I think. And it was with all these bands, and so like there was like a carriage of the train that was like for jamming and like hanging out with these bands. And these are bands that like probably no one knows now, but they were really big at the time. And me and a whole bunch of other journalists were invited on to be part of this journey. So we go with them the whole way, and we were supposed to like document it. I think probably the majority of us did not turn in anything because we were so drunk on Bacardi the whole time that everything was just lost in the sands of Bacardi time. But I met Georgia Francis King, who's now a really good friend of mine, and she lived in Melbourne, and she ended up referring me to a job that was going in Melbourne with a street press magazine in Melbourne. And she was like, just apply, you can move to Melbourne. And at that time I was like, why not? So I applied and I got the job, and I moved to Melbourne. And that was my first full-time job, was being the arts and online editor and associate or assistant music editor for Beat magazine, which is a street press magazine that I think still exists in Melbourne. And I moved to Brunswick, and the office was in Cremorne, and I did that for probably about a year.
I love that. And I think even just looking back, like I think all the mix of like odd jobs and stuff running around different places. Like if your college experience doesn't have that, where it's just like a bunch of random things that you've tried, I feel like you're missing out a little bit. Like, and I think it's just so many as well. I remember when so the last episode that's probably up is my own one where my sister interviewed me for this. I was like, oh right, let's might as well do this. And we finished the whole thing, and she's like, Akanksha, you never talked about all the stupid jobs you did. Like you should. And I was like, I forgot. Like as it genuinely, like
Yeah.
I never appreciated what it's like being the actual interviewee of like actually going through things and remembering all the different bits. It is very different. So I'm like very glad you did it, but yeah, it's so interesting. Those jobs make such a big difference, and I think have definitely like easily a bigger part of who I am now than the degree ever was,
Yeah.
like 100%. But
Yeah.
I love that, and I think the small connections make a very big impact as we go on. So
Yeah.
what
And I
happened?
still think about them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, I mean, they're easily my fondest memories. Like chatting to like this old woman that used to come in, like this elderly woman, to buy her makeup every Saturday morning, and she'd kind of come in and we'd just have a 20-minute chat like every 2 weeks. That was it, and I was like, I love this. But
Yeah.
right, so we've been here a year and we're at being an editor now. So what's next? What's
Yeah.
happening?
So I had two things happen. One is I've come into this job essentially mainly doing writing, a little bit of editing with the kind of online publication. And my dream was really to, follow this creativity, like do what I loved. And what I found working for a print media organization, especially in this business model where the magazine was free, was that it wasn't really what I wanted at all. It wasn't fun. It
Yeah.
actually was very administrative work. And I didn't have, and I wasn't supposed to really spend a lot of time kind of editing, to be honest. Like it was like the copy just needed to be in, and I needed to make sure it was like free from spelling errors and stuff. But there wasn't like, it wasn't the kind of highbrow publication where I was going like back and forth and like shaping the work or anything. Like it was really like, just like get something out there. And we had to publish every week, weekly turnaround. So
Yep.
there were a lot of long deadlines to get this publication out every week. And yeah, it was intense. And it also was not, yeah, like they were great skills to learn, but they were not like what I thought it would be at all. Like the
Yeah.
scales kind of fell from my eyes, and I was like, oh wow, this is like, a reasonably low paid, very intense job. I think I was earning like 37K or something.
Yeah.
To work my butt off, really. So that was happening. The other thing that was happening was I was quite unwell. So I had actually been diagnosed in high school with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease, where essentially like your large intestine is affected. And I was quite sick in high school. Like I was in hospital maybe 3 or 4 times. I ended up getting like special points on my final exams because I was in hospital during my final year. And I was kind of just like dealing with it with medication. It was very up and down. Like I'd get flare-ups, but then it would settle down. And after I moved to Melbourne and I did this job, it just got really, really bad. And it got so bad to the point that I had to take myself to hospital for what ended up being emergency surgery. So I knew that this surgery was something that I had to consider. They'd tried to kind of get me to consider it when I was younger. And at the time, as like a 16-year-old, I was like, well, no, I can't. Like that's
Yeah.
like I just couldn't get my head around it because it's a very intense surgery. But at this point, I was like 21, and the doctors basically said, like you're out of options. Like this is it. In fact, if you keep going with the medication that you're on, which was like a combination of things, but included quite a lot of prednisone, which is like a corticosteroid, they're like you risk actually just having huge problems with the side effects from the medication, which could include like cancer, like I already had osteoporosis, like all sorts of things. Sorry if this is taking like a dark turn, but it's
No, I mean,
important.
it's a part of life, and this is kind of the whole point of like
Part of
looking
life.
behind the life and the decisions and why they're made. And the decision was based on health, and I think it's very important to talk about
Yeah.
that.
So I was pretty sick. I remember going to the hospital. My parents were actually overseas at the time, which was very unfortunate. But it was one of these moments where like I knew that this was my decision to make for my life, and like it was really no one else could make this decision for me. And sometimes you have these moments where you're like I can't phone this one in. And I had to decide. I was in so much pain at this point that like when I presented to hospital, they put me on a morphine drip. So
Jeez,
I was
yeah.
like, I was well gone. Um, so I decided to do it, and it was a very major surgery. So what we ended up doing, I might they removed my entire large intestine, so I do not have one now.
Oh wow.
And they use part of your small intestine to reconstruct what is called a J pouch. So it's kind of like I have like a replacement organ that is kind of like a bladder, but in your gut, really. It's like a pouch, internal. And it was a 3-part surgery. So the first surgery, they removed my large intestine entirely. And then the small intestine is essentially like I had an ileostomy. So that means the end of my small intestine had been brought to my skin, and I had a bag on the outside, and I had that for 8 months. And then the second surgery, they reconnected essentially my insides. So they had kind of, it was, if you think about it like plumbing, they kind of like put me back together again. And then the third surgery was the takedown surgery. So the external thing got put back and connected in, and then I was just like from the outside looked like an normal person.
Yeah.
I had a pretty serious complication with the first surgery because I was so sick. I had a really bad infection, and that ended up being quite a drama. But yeah, when I was in hospital, well, when I went to hospital, essentially like the place I was working couldn't continue to employ me, which was very obviously upsetting, but like not really even my biggest priority at that point. And fair enough, like as a small business, they were just like, well, like we can't kind of just pay you to be off work for like a year and a half, which makes sense. And it was, there's kind of like the before surgery times and the after surgery times in my life. And while I was recovering, I had a lot of time to think about what was going to be next for me. And the recovery was, it was like a year and a half, 2 years of recovery. There was a long period, like, after the first surgery where I was like learning to walk again, and like it was all a big deal. So my partner at the time, who I had met at the publication, was the guy who made the website. And he and I had been collaborating a lot, and he was like, well, I've got my own little company, which at the time was, I think, only like maybe 3 people, and I was like the 4th person. He was like, why don't you come and like help us? And it was really like non-specific. It was like, help us somehow. And it, for a long time, it was like handling customer support and stuff like that. And then eventually it became, there was a moment where he said, can you fix this? It's really easy. And I was like, I don't really know what you're talking about. He was like, it's just CSS. And I was like, I don't know what CSS is. And he was like, well, Google it. And so I Googled it, and that was the first time I wrote any code. I did it completely wrong, and I did not know what Git was, so it got overwritten the next time that production was deployed. But I did it. I fixed it in some way, and then that was the start of me kind of learning code, which was huge.
That is I've had I can't remember who did that, which is terrible. Last year I used to be able to be like, oh, this episode had this and this was exactly it. It's completely gone out of my brain. But someone on one of the episodes definitely had that, and I think it's definitely a pattern, right? Where it's like someone in your life is very into coding or is like really involved with it, and will like be like, just give it a shot. Like, it's not hard. Yeah. Because it does seem like it's quite hard, right? And I mean, it's the same with my sister. I'm just like, give it a try. Just go try it. Like, she was the person who'd be like, Python, that's a snake. Like, please open your eyes a little bit. I know you know more than this. But yeah, it is such an interesting point where like someone around you, you're like, and I love the fact that like you're like, no, just go Google it, because so much of it is just, there's so much good content out there. It works. It's a perfect answer.
Yeah, and it was Googleable, and it was definitely a different time online to what it is now. There's even more available now, right? Now you could like go and do a course on Udemy or whatever.
Yeah.
But with a combination of like encouragement, self-directed learning, and review from him and the other people in the company, I was able to kind of build this career. And like the biggest thing about it that was, I think, probably the biggest challenge was the idea of starting from zero. So like I had gotten to the point where I'd like done a lot of writing, fair amount of editing. I'd gotten this good job at this publication. I was like, oh, this is my career. And then kind of having to say goodbye to that career and start a new one from the ground, being quite bad at it as well. Like I was good at writing and I was good at editing. I was bad at coding. Like, oh, I don't like the feeling of being bad at something. But it kind of convinced me in the end when I realized that like the thing that I was looking for at this last job that I couldn't find, which was the creativity, I actually found in coding.
Yeah.
And I found not only creativity, but a combination of like kind of problem solving creativity, which I love. But also I really found that um, the more objective nature of technology was really comforting in a way for me. There was something about working in writing and the arts where it was like, is this good writing or not good writing? Like it's kind of just up to someone to decide, and that might be me, it might be someone else, but it's like very subjective. Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Are you like a celebrity in the scene? Are you not? Like all of it was very fuzzy, like how to be successful in that world.
Yeah.
Whereas there was something very rewarding about writing code, and either it runs or it doesn't. And if it doesn't run, you can go and find out why it's not running and you can make it run. And obviously it's not that simple, but there was something about that objectivity that I really like. And then combining that with the puzzle solving, even if the combination of those two things mean you spent 3 days looking for a rogue semicolon, I was that was right for me at the time, and it kind of got me interested in the possibilities of working in that space.
And I think that rogue semicolon is something that every single person in tech has faced, and if they haven't, they're lying. Like that's an absolute lie. There's no way. Like, the amount of hours I've spent trying to fix it, and I'm like, but like it's just like that high is just so rewarding. And I've talked about this, like getting it working. And I'm like, oh my god, oh those hours were worth it. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm back in those hours, and I'm like, was it actually a question? Was it worth it? But like it's a loop and it works while it does, and it's great. And I think it's really interesting you talk about that problem solving, creativity, because so over Christmas, over the holidays just gone, I picked up a sewing machine because it was on sale on Boxing Day. It was a really good sale too. It was like $400 or something, down to like $100. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Because I'd kind of flippantly said that to my mom, where I was just like, she's like, oh, I need to buy this. I'm like, that's literally like 2 pieces of like fabric sewn down the side. Like I could do, like it's so easy, like just a kind of a flippant thing. And I'm like, maybe I could, like maybe I found that it's exactly the same in my head as coding, where it's like all these different pieces, they need to join together in a certain way, and if I do it this way it'll look like this, but if I do it this way it'll look like this, and if I join them inside out, that's what looks better. And it's like all these different pieces of it where it's exactly the same to me in code. And I'm like, I never thought about coding as like a problem solving, like in that context of like it's almost like a puzzle, like that's exactly what it works. But yeah, it's a whole new discovery for me recently. Like the last 2 weeks have been like, oh, this is it. This is how my brain actually computes code, apparently. It's the same as sewing.
Totally. Yeah, and the other things like precision, attention to detail, sequencing, reading instructions, problem solving like a complex thing. So like, is it the needle? Is it the spool? Like, is it the pedal? Like, is it plugged in? Like, it's debugging,
like breaking it
right?
down
Like
one by
it's very
one. Like,
similar.
yeah, exactly. It really works. But yes, sorry, coming back to this. So you've now started coding. So is this where the dev part comes into play? Like you're fully going into code?
So this is where I'm like, sorry.
No, all I was going to say was like, is it fully self-learning, kind of self-directed learning, or is there more how did you learn to code, essentially, was where that question was going, I think.
Yes, how did I learn to code? Very much Google it and see. I didn't do any courses. And I was very, in a lot of ways, very lucky to be around the people who I was around who had learned in the same way. And it was new to me. I actually did not, like I'd obviously taught myself things in the past. Like I'd taught myself how to do photography, and I taught myself, how to write fiction, which I was really into. And, I'd done some of that, but I'd never taught myself something really technical like this. And I think about it, I've used this metaphor with other people, and I still think about this. I really didn't know that it was a way to learn, actually. And I think I kind of had assumed that like people who worked in tech, like a lot of people do, I had assumed that people who work in tech had done computer science degrees or were somehow otherwise qualified through a system or institution.
Yep.
And the idea that there were all these people working making websites for people who pretty much had just like graduated from the school of Google, was, I mean, like I kind of knew I had been an online person for a long time, right? Like I am like a proper nerd. Like I had customized my spaces. I'd made my custom live journal theme. I, was a DeviantArt, Neopets, AIM, IRC kind of type of nerd. And I'd made some GeoCities websites. I'd kind of dabbled, but there's no part of me that ever thought that that could be my job, like that
Yeah.
that could be my career, because I just thought that this was like, well, obviously I'm just like a dabbler. Like I'm not a real professional. And the big realization for me was that there is a pathway, there is a door for dabblers, which is like dabble harder and eventually dabble for money. And I actually didn't know, not only did I not know I could open that door, I didn't know that door existed. And so
Yeah.
it took for someone to actually just say like, hey, there's that door over there. You can consider like you could open it, for me to even like get into the mindset of this being something that I could take more seriously. So this was where I started to, yeah, engage with it, go through the kind of identity forming on two sides. One was after surgery, I was no longer sick, which was amazing. So I
Yeah.
was no longer a sick person. I was now essentially like a recovering / well person, which was new to me and I had to learn to adjust to. And then I was no longer thinking of myself as a writer, and I was thinking of myself as essentially like a person getting into tech, person working in technology. And yeah, and so that was a big shift, is the biggest shift probably for me in my career. And we worked on just like all sorts of different projects. I worked on like mental health first aid and like Near My National and these quite important projects. Worked on some strange projects. I worked on a like amazing website for an author who wrote like self-help kind of discovering your sexuality kind of books. She was amazing. I specifically remember it is her whole website was just raw HTML.
Yeah.
And that was part of the gig, like that you just had to deal with it. She didn't have money to redo it. I remember liaising with her about her new book that she had launched, and she wanted me to make this page for it. She'd give me the copy and the picture of the book, and I put it all together. And she was like, "Can you make the book like kind of throb?" And I was like, And I like didn't really know what that meant, and so I was like putting together all these animations in Photoshop, like how to make this thing like look throbbing. And she was like, "Can it throb faster?" And I was like, "Wow, this is quite a job." Um, but primarily we focused on Drupal, so CMS stuff, and I ended up working on a lot of Drupal sites and getting quite good at Drupal. I spoke at some Drupal conferences, and in particular, Drupal has a theme system, which was what I was quite interested in developing. And I worked in that space for a while, and that really got me interested in, well, it was called theming then, and now it's probably really front-end development. So it got me kind of interested in the space of like, not only how to make things look good, but how to make them, it was essentially like design systems that we were working on. So a theme is like a set of building blocks.
Yeah.
And that became my focus from there. So I started to move towards the front end side of things. But I was, Drupal is a PHP system, so I was a PHP dev, and we were using Vagrant and all that kind of stuff. So I'd done a little bit of everything. But my interest was really in theming, SaaS at the time, and then what, eventually turned into the world of like React and stuff.
Oh, perfect. I think it was so great when you talked about like the doors and stuff of like not even knowing they exist. And that was kind of like the premise behind the whole podcast and stuff, where I was like, I know there are so many people who've had like weird career shifts, right? And I mean, at the stage where I was like, oh my God, yeah, like I did maths and I'm like ended up in data science. Literally like the most classic pathway into it at this stage. I think there's no like easily, like almost every data scientist I know is like done a maths degree or something like that, right? It's not uncommon. It was just uncommon to me because everyone I was surrounded by was not like that. I was like, oh, like am I unique? I was not. But I was like, there's definitely other unique people who've had these, and they'll be great to talk to. And it's interesting that like it's I still get people being like, I never knew that was a thing. And I'm like, I mean, this is also like the bubble part of things, right? Like I'm in a bubble where I'm like constantly talking to people like yourself or other people who've been, and I get this question a lot where they're like, how do you find all these people to like talk to? Like, where do you find the guests? And I'm like, great question. It's just a lot of like internet stalking. I'm not gonna lie. Like they're everywhere. It's not hard to find these people to come up like and chat to me. It's just more, have they got the time to do it? Because I'm usually willing to do it. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's like a highlight to be like, it's here. Like we're here. We're more than welcoming. I swear we're happy to have you. Kind of a like opening end of things.
Yeah.
And then like fully diving in, like, oh, the conferences bit gets me. I'm just like, yes, you know, when you're like at a conference and I'm like, no, I made it. It's like I can like be here and like talk about this and people will listen.
Yeah, it's interesting. The community thing was actually a really big part of it, and part of why like I didn't know about the door was because I didn't know anyone who worked in tech, and
Yeah.
like no one who I'd gone to school with had done it, and like no one who I'd ever met had done it. So like it was completely new to me. And then once I was in, you got to remember this is also like 10, 12 years ago now, right? So it was a very different world. Like we weren't anywhere near as kind of crazily connected as we are now.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really like there weren't even as many people working in tech, to be honest. And I was the only woman at the company. For a long time, I was the only woman I knew who was working in tech. And so the reason why I started to go out to meetups and conferences was because I was looking for more data points. I was looking for more community and more people to meet, and more of a sense of like, where could I go? Because like it's really great to be, I've learned how to write code. I'm starting to like feel like I'm getting better at this. But then the question was started to arise was, well, like what happens next?
Yeah.
And I had no role models, and no one local to me really was available. So when I started to go out to these meetups and conferences, the first conference I pitched for, I only did so because someone who I had met through my work, so we worked with some other agencies, and Donna Benjamin, who was also still a friend of mine, and I had worked together. She thought I was good, and she was part of the Drupal open source community. So, and I think she probably still is. And she encouraged me to submit a talk, and I was like, I haven't even been to a tech conference. Like, what is a talk? And she kind of mentored me through that, and my talk was accepted, and I did this talk, and I felt like a complete weirdo. Like I was like, I had no idea how to calibrate it. Do I know stuff? Do I not know stuff? I think it was the weirdest experience, but it went well. And after that, I started doing more community stuff because I'd gotten good feedback and people liked it. And yeah, I'm aware that like it's 4:51. We've only got to like essentially my first job in tech.
It just, I'm like fascinated by it all, to be honest. I'm like all these like I'm like listening through and I'm just like, oh, that's such a good bit to like, that's perfect for like a teaser. There's like so many good bits to like snip out as well. I'm just like in my head I'm like, this is going so well.
I'm happy to keep talking.
But yes, okay, so this is the first job. We're kind of like fully succeeding at it. Like, is this where, and you're moving towards the design stuff a little bit more because front end design, whichever bit we want to focus towards.
Yeah.
Was this where, like, I mean, is there a new job change coming? What's happening next?
So what happens next is like we've actually in this little agency, it's kind of grown a bit. We've hired some people. I've started kind of managing people a little bit. I was like the lead. And then the two guys, so one who was my partner at the time and his like best mate essentially, his mate decided, he was also a musician, and he decided that he wanted to really follow that thread of his life. So he moved to London and is now like a successful producer or something in London. Good on him. But because he decided to follow that, it was like kind of calling it quits on the agency. They wrapped it up basically. So they let go everyone who they had employed, and then we all kind of went our separate ways. And I ended up going to work for one of our biggest clients, who was a startup called Equium in the prop tech sector. So using similar technologies and stuff, but a bigger company. I had kind of had the good fortune of being there, watching them as the company really grew from being like just a couple of people to hiring more and more and like becoming this little team. And when I joined, they had like already a reasonably established dev team at that point. And I kind of joined as a front end dev. I don't even know if that was officially my title, but that was what I focused on. And then while I was at Equium, I was doing a lot of work with their designer, who was actually more, well, he was really a marketing kind of focused designer. And so he would be handing me designs for like the interfaces, were all really like beautiful high fidelity designs, very aesthetic. And I would be kind of, as you do as a front end, I was kind of like, oh, this isn't possible, or like, can we change this, and figuring stuff out. And he eventually was like, you know, maybe you should train to be a designer because you seem to know a lot about this. And I was interested, but not sure really what that meant. And they paid for me, and very good when this can happen, when you can kind of make the transition through a workplace. But they paid for me to study at General Assembly, so I did a part-time UX design course there. And like I was pleased to find out that a lot of what, you know, it was about, I had already kind of somehow learned. I just didn't know the right words for, like in my time with, especially at the agency, I started doing a lot of these things and having a lot of these thoughts. And then there was a bunch of techniques and things that I learned. And I had the good fortune of working with George Cockrell, who taught me in that course, and I met a few other interesting people who've all gone to have very illustrious careers. And that was really a great moment for me to discover this discipline of UX design, and I could see kind of the first time like a path forward for myself that made sense to me. And the biggest thing that made sense to me was that it kind of combined my technical skills that I had learned over the last 5 years or whatever with these other skills from my past life, like the creativity and the you know, I used to be a journalist, I used to interview people for a living, like all of these things started to like come together, and I was like, oh, there's like a way to weave my true selves together, and that was really exciting for me.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God, I think like finding that bit where everything fits is so weird. Like, I mean, yes, there's jobs where you're like, oh, I can do this. This is great. It's a good fit for what it is right now. But finding that one where it's just like you bring your whole self to it and everything just, it's like a whole new level. And you're like, oh, I'm right now. I'm like, I fit in. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. It made tech make sense. Like I still, for many years after that, did do kind of combination roles where I did kind of writing code stuff as well as doing design and research stuff. And I still think it's kind of one of the things that is a strength for me, is that I have that technical background, and I now have like a very strong discipline of design and product and now kind of management stuff. But having that diversity in my skill set, I think, is really, really important, especially given the way that teams work now, which is very cross-functional. So to enable collaboration between different people, like it's really good to be able to kind of speak all their different languages, and that's kind of what I can do now, which is a cool skill to have.
Yeah, exactly. Like joining everyone else as well as I think when things just work so well like that, where it's just like, I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, and this is how we can do it. It's so great.
Yeah, I feel like a translator sometimes, and I think that's very my personality. Like I'm very much a mediator kind of style person.
I like that, and like especially knowing that, like I think makes such a difference. Because I remember right before, so the first job that I the full time, my first like graduate job and stuff, which was in Melbourne, at Redify, which is like a software development company. And I remember before any interviews or anything happened, like what I thought the position would be in my head was like, oh, maybe I could be, because like I'm not in tech, like I don't code, I did a maths degree, I literally wrote theorems on paper, like from a chalkboard that our professor wrote it in. Like we didn't even have like tech in like college, like it was nothing like that. So it was just like, okay, cool. And in my head I was like, I can talk to people, like that's my skill, like I always like I can chat, like that is what I can do. And like what I fully thought that role was like, I was like, oh, maybe I can go pitch the fact that I'm like, hey, like you've got all these tech people, and like you've got business people, I can be the person that chats to everyone and be like connecting. I went in and realized they were one of those, like, I mean, it was very different. I haven't really seen it somewhere since. They were like, our consultants are our tech people, like you do both. And I was like, oh no, like where do I fit in now? What I imagined this role to be was completely gone. But yeah, I mean, it worked, everything worked itself out. But it's really funny looking back now where I'm like, oh no.
And I'm sure what you found was that your communication skills were valuable.
It's still
no
what I
matter
do.
what the
Exactly.
role,
And I do it more than ever now, let's be real. But yes.
Yeah.
So what's happening next? So we've done the degree, the course, whichever way you want to put it. Yeah. So we're now doing a lot more UX stuff.
Yeah.
Are we fully starting to step away from dev now, like more into the like leading stuff and managing as well at the same time?
Yeah, so I went from being kind of the UX designer to being the UX lead, and I hired some UX designers in, and I was kind of running the UX, building the UX discipline at this company, and I was doing design sprints and design systems and commissioning research projects, and assigning people to stuff. It was good. It was interesting. I ended up moving on from that position, and I was honestly, I think I was a bit burnt out, and what did I do after that? I think I went and worked at oh yeah, I think around that time I had met Laura, who you've interviewed. Laura and I had crossed paths at maybe some UX conferences, and then we'd also crossed paths at the yoga studio that we went to together in the city, Move. And I can't remember how we figured out that we'd known each other from both, but we did, and we realized that we had shared interests in both UX design and yoga. And I think it was at a conference, it was like at a UX Australia conference or something, that I got to chatting with her. And she was kind of, I think, I'd done a little job in between working at a content strategy agency called Weave, who I'd worked with previously. They were one of the collaborators from my agency land. And that wasn't quite right for me either. Like it was just a bit, I wasn't really doing enough of the UX stuff that I wanted to do. And I chatted to Laura, and she was working at Clover. And Clover was a fintech startup, also based in the city. And she was like, oh, like I kind of need some help, come in and help me. And so I came in and I contracted for them, and then eventually transitioned to an employee there, which was a UX engineer role. So both Laura and I were kind of doing this, where it was like a combination of UX design and research, and also front end React stuff. And at the same time, I had started to noodle around with the idea of maybe starting my own company. So I worked with Clover, I think 3 or 4 days a week, and then my partner and I, the same guy, we were kind of trying to figure out how we could make our own product. And so we were starting to try and figure that out together. And we were working on an idea, which was a project estimation tool using Monte Carlo simulations to try and provide pretty high fidelity estimates. And that was kind of where we were at with it. And I was really like developing the product idea, doing the research and product market fit, lean strategy stuff, but also I was learning a new technology. So I was learning two new technologies at the same time. One was doing React stuff, and the other was doing ClojureScript and Poplon on this tool, which was functional programming, which was a totally new deal for me at the time. But I'm still a big fan of functional programming. I think it's amazing. So I was writing ClojureScript, which is Clojure kind of with a JavaScript layer rather than a Node layer. So it's for front end stuff. Was working with the team at Clover, and the team at Clover were amazing. It was probably the most high performing team I've ever worked with. Everyone there was superstar, and it was only a small team, but it was just vibes. It was so good. We were achieving so much stuff. That was awesome. Probably the best team I've ever worked with.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God. And also, like, I mean, I knew you and Laura had worked together, but I didn't realize you knew each other that well. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Sorry, for context, Laura Summers has now runs her own AI ethical AI startup and stuff. So check her out. I will link it somewhere in here about her own episode. Oh, such a great episode as well. But that's brilliant. We should all just go do yoga someday. This is perfect. Like one day when things are like normal. I love this.
Yes, so we ended up, I think we finished up at Clover at around the same time. And then after that, I had been doing other stuff. So I'm kind of back in like almost a similar mode to like I was at the start. I like started to pick up some like side projects and stuff. We were working on this product, but I was also kind of doing like consulting stuff. We actually set up two different businesses. And so I was doing a bit of, helping other people out with various tech bits and bobs. And one of, in terms of like funny pathways into things, I had been approached by someone who I'd met back in agency land to do a talk at the Melbourne PHP meetup about user experience design. And it was really like, when you do talks about user experience for designers, you're preaching to the choir. And this was really about like, let these PHP devs know what UX is so they can value it more. Like it's like a bridge building exercise. And I was really into that. I like the idea of like advocacy, and I especially cross-functional advocacy. So I did it. I can't remember what the talk was about. And there was a guy in the audience who just thought it was great. He was like, oh, well, we really need that. And he got in touch with me afterwards and he said, can you come in and like talk to, the boss at my business? We really need someone like you. And I think we can make it work. And that business was Estimate One. And Estimate One is a construction industry technology platform. And so I ended up working for Estimate One after Clover because they were kind of, it was just like the right transition. And it was a really great experience as well, also an amazing.
I think those kind of things are like, it's one of those like it's meant to be. I've realized, I used to be like, oh, like I know what it sounds like. But I'm like, no, do you know what? I believe it. This is it. Like, this is the year where I'm just like, apparently I believe in manifestations and this is who I am now. It will be what it'll be. I'm not in the wishy-washy sense, but like if you manifest something, like properly ideate and goal stuff out, like why would it not happen? Like you're already thinking about it. Of course it's going to happen. But those kind of things, like, I've definitely been at meetups and stuff where I'm presenting and like someone will come up and be like, and I'm just like, oh my God, is this what in the name of God? Like, how did that? It works so well. And I think this kind of goes back to that whole networking part, right? A lot of people don't think of, and I find it so fascinating. A lot of people don't consider speaking at events and things like that networking. They're like, if you go to an event with the intention of meeting other people, that's networking. But putting your own brand out there, being like, I can do this kind of stuff, is not like it's not in the same vein for some people. And I'm like, interesting. Here we go. Perfect example of really works out.
Yeah. Estimate One were a really cool team. And I essentially contracted for them. And I was mentoring a kind of more junior designer there and working some various bits and bobs. I was very lucky to join them at a very specific point in time where they were working on finishing this big like whole company goal of like heaps and heaps of sales or something. It was just the energy was super high. They achieved this goal and I'd like kind of come in right at the end and they were like, we're going to celebrate by sending everyone to Waiheke Island in New Zealand. And I was like, yay, good for you. And he was like, no, you're coming. And I was like, what? So I got this like cool trip, which was wild and awesome. And then I kind of worked with them for a while. I worked with some really amazing people, including a consultant from Cogent who really kind of introduced me to some strategic product thinking stuff. And so it was a great role. At the same time, my relationship was kind of ending but it was, I had this role at least, and that was something that could be stable for me. So it was kind of a little life raft for me, and a good, also kind of my first introduction to leadership. too. So I was really part of the leadership team there and went to their leadership offsite and did some proper leadership management training, which was cool. And yeah, it was a really fun team.
I love that. I think it just sounds so much fun, like the whole time. I think it's one of those like it sounds like one of those roles where a lot of things that you want to be taking steps into, like, oh, this might be next, it lines itself up already, and you're like, okay, this I'll experience it, this will be great, like I'll learn as I go, it'll be perfect. And I think those roles are so invaluable, like really, like you just can't say enough about them. It sounds perfect.
Yeah, especially when you're around people who are also very, like, it's a learning culture, and this was a culture that was really, you know, benefited from some incredible people who had, a passion for learning and growth, and the whole, it's one of the benefits of startups is that you get a lot of that, and I felt very lucky to be included in that. And then hilariously, my next job also came about in a very funny way, in that I had done an interview for a different podcast, and after the interview, the guy who interviewed me was like, "Oh, I actually run a company, and you sound amazing. Can you come and work for me?" And I was like, weird, is this a scam? And it wasn't, so I went to work for them for
I love that thought of like, sure, that this is scam, like this is just like junk email, move along. Like I did that for like the role I'm in right now, like in my head when I first read the thing, and I was like, they're looking at the wrong person, move along.
Yeah. So that was cool. And they were another startup. They worked in Rate was in customer experience technology. And I ended up reconnecting with Laura actually while I was there, and Laura came and worked for me there as well. So I was director of product and design there, which was like the biggest, coolest role I'd had to date. So it was very exciting. And yeah, now we're getting close to like modern day as well, which is cool. So we've actually made it to, this would be in like 2017. So I only worked at Reddit for a little bit. It was a really great opportunity, but in the end, it just like, I think it was just maybe a bit too chaos for me. And I realized that probably what I needed to do was work in a bigger company. So I ended up going to work for RMIT Online after that. And RMIT Online is kind of a subgroup within RMIT, and their remit was innovation, to try and essentially bring short courses and some of their degree courses online, which was obviously still really important, more important now than ever. And I worked in that team as a senior product designer, managing some of the other designers, and also managing a developer and a videographer, which was cool. And working with learning designers who I'd never worked with before, and I didn't really know much about the discipline. It's a really interesting discipline, and I've still got like some great connections from all of these places, really. But the team was very tight knit at RMIT Online, and I did that for about a year. And the biggest thing, and anyone who's like heard this story now could probably predict this, but I was just not really prepared for the change of pace. So working at a university is very different to working at a startup, and I'd pretty much just done like startup up until that point. And it was a big shock to the system that I had gone from like, like not just, like 3 or 4 people. Some of these companies had like 50, 60, maybe more people in it, but just the pace of a startup, the risk taking, the intensity, creativity, innovation. Not that RMIT had none of it. They had some incredible people pushing the culture in that direction. Just like a lot more red tape, really, just to do with universities. And kind of as it should be, right? You don't want to be too kind of breakneck in that kind of setting. But I felt, for me, like I just kind of felt like I wasn't achieving anything, and I don't think that's true. Like I think I was achieving stuff. I just like wasn't achieving it at the pace and style that I was used to. And so I ended up kind of wrapping it up there, and that's when I made the jump to Usability Hub. So that was 2 years ago.
Oh, look at that. We're fully up to speed.
Yeah. You've done really well to get through all of that, and I am sorry that there were so many things.
I don't think so. I think it was a really good view of it all in terms of what each job or like what different parts brought to the table, as well as kind of how it all happened and what worked and what didn't and what's happening. It was a perfect like, hey, this is my life story. I love it. Which is, I love hearing these. I say this all the time. I think I started this like, yes, okay, it's great to get like these kind of stories out in the world and like giving it a platform, but I also think I'm just like a nosy little child. I'm like, oh, I love hearing about other people's stories and I think it's great. Like, tell me more about your life. And I think it just starts a lot of conversations that don't just come up on their own. Like, these are kind of topics and things that won't just ever come up in a random chat with someone. And I love hearing about it. I'm like, oh, so many people I've met, like, I mean, I'm like, yes, you and Laura do yoga, you're into, like, all these different parts of life that you never think about, like, will come up. So I love these kind of things. But thank you so much for your time. And I think, look, honestly, most episodes are kind of around the hour, and I don't think we've gone too over it. So this is perfect. Okay. It winds up really, really well. But no, this was such a good chat. Just, I mean, yes, it was a great episode, but I think it was like the perfect episode to start the year off with, because it was just like iconically Pats and Covered in that context of like, it has everything that I was like, we talk about on this. So it was really, really good. Everything from kind of like, this is why this decision was made, and this is nothing to do with work. Like, this was a personal like life decision, and this is why it was happening. So this is I'm very thankful for you to share all that.
No worries. I think it's important, and yeah, like, not every decision is just work, you know. There's many different reasons why you might want to you know, go in a different direction. And, you know, now I'm lucky enough to have had I've worked with a coach over the last 2 years, and I've really been focusing in on my skills in management leadership, and that's kind of my next direction, is like, after all of that, you know, kind of how can I make that all work for me. And I think that's kind of what the next step is. But, you know, like, it's important to understand that you don't kind of just like wake up and then like one day you're a manager or whatever. Like, there's like, you have to do a lot of stuff and have a lot of experiences and figure a lot of stuff out. And some of it you figure out yourself, some of it you get help with. Some things you're forced to figure out, some things you choose to. And yeah, it's just good to know. I think the most important thing is it's good to know if there's a door there. And
yes,
if you're not sure, I would recommend like going up to the wall and like knocking on it a few times anyway, just because there might be a door, even if it didn't.
Oh, I absolutely love that note to wrap this up on. That is perfect advice to give to anybody listening, to be honest. And even whether that's like, if you're even already in tech, there's other doors within tech that you could be knocking on. Go try them out. I like that. Look, we'll wrap it up there for today. Thank you for listening. If you've been here the whole time, I very much appreciate it. If you have listened for the full hour, please consider donating to the podcast. It's on the website. It does take a lot of hours in the background, so it would be very appreciated in helping run the maintenance and stuff. But thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. We're starting to cycle off every 2 weeks again for the year. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.